Today's competitive speculation video for Scarlet and Violet features one of my favorite Pokemon, that being Regice. Now, as the name might suggest, Regice is a Mono Ice type. And on the surface, Mono Ice does not look like the most amazing offensive typing. We only have 4 super effectives, and Ice is resisted by 4 typings. But if we look at the percentages, Mono Ice has the highest percentage of super effective damage of any mono type in the game. It just also has a fairly generous resist spread. So some of those super effectives are actually pretty common typings. I know Grass is a common defensive Terra typing, and Ground is just a common offensive typing. And while the offense is actually pretty good, the defense is not. You're weak to 4 typings and only resist Ice, which I don't understand why it's still like that. And there's not a single defensive Terra type that's going to cover all 4 of these. Now, this is one of the Regis that has Clear Body as its primary ability, which is a very good ability to prevent your stats from being dropped by your opponents. The hidden ability is Ice Body, which is a lot less practical, even if there probably is a use case for it. Especially in Gen 9, though, there could actually be quite a reasonable use case for this specifically, but I still think Clear Body's better overall. Now, probably the most interesting part of Regice is the stat distribution. So it's quite a slow Pokemon at 50 base speed, so not the best Trick Room speed. You could kind of get away with this in Trick Room, but keep in mind that Trick Room sweepers are typically slower than this. You're probably not going to be investing speed in it, regardless of whether it's in Trick Room or not. And the other stat that has 50 is the attack stat, so physical offense is not really a thing with this Pokemon. There's also a reasonable amount of hit points at 80, and the 100s are put on special attack and defense. So there is a reasonable amount of special offense, and the physical bulk is actually okay. But where this Pokemon really shines is that massive 200 base special defense. And we can see what that looks like making a reasonably bulky Regice build, and comparing it to the Pikalytics Fluttermane. I put Mystical Fire on it instead of Protect because that's super effective on Regice, and the numbers on Fluttermane's side are mediocre at best. It's actually pretty bad. You're not doing a lot of damage to Regice with Fluttermane, which Fluttermane's quite an offensive Pokemon. Even with Choice Specs and Fairy Terra, that Moonblast is still not a guaranteed 2-hit KO onto this Regice. And the Flash Cannon on Regice is a guaranteed 2-hit KO. So if you were running Flash Cannon as an answer to Fluttermane, if it's not terastallized, you're guaranteed to just straight up beat it in a fight. And even if you're not running a coverage move, the Ice Beam does have a slim chance of a 2-hit KO, though it is very, very slim. And that's without any items or terastallization. I'm comparing this to Choice Specs Fairy Terra Fluttermane. It's still quite an even fight, even with that advantage given to Fluttermane. But we could make this really fun. We could make Regice a Steel type. And now that Terra Boosted Moonblast is really not putting out a lot, and Flash Cannon is easily knocking out Fluttermane. The big numbers are fun to look at. So we're going to change the build up a little bit on Regice, make it half Spadef, half hit points, with Sassy Nature, so special defense up, and Assault Vest. And we're going to leave it still Terra for this, and Mystical Fire's like the only way you're doing any reasonable amounts of damage to this Regice. It just eats those hits all day long and is blowing past the Fluttermane with its still Terra boosted Flash Cannon and high amounts of special bulk. So it's very easy to set up Regice to literally wall Fluttermane and make it useless. Now, going off of Gen 8's moveset, I kind of showcased the most useful moves in the damage calcs, but this does also get a few other interesting attacks like Icy Wind. Charge Beam could actually make sense on this Pokemon because of how bulky it is. There's Ancient Power, which could also make sense in a weird way. Zap Cannon, which is highly inconsistent, don't use that. Unless you are, for whatever reason, running a lock-on Zap Cannon build with Regice, I just don't do that. This gets a lot of physical moves, but I'm going to ignore all of those because 50 base attack stats really bad. This does also get round, which is interesting. There's Thunder, if you have this in a rain team for whatever reason, and also Focus Blast. Not really something I would play into with this. As for the more supportive options of Regice, we do have Psych Up, Thunder Wave, Endure, Amnesia, which could be quite fun, as well as Safeguard. So, should Regice ever make it into Gen 9 soon enough to not have to fight box legendaries, I think there is a use case where Regice could actually be quite strong. And that is because you can change its very bad defensive typing into, say, Electric, or, as I showed in the calculations, Steel. You can use the terrestrialization gimmick to give this the bulk that it kind of needed to actually be a special wall. And you can combine this with the additional buff that ice types get from the newly reworked Snow that would also give this Pokemon a little bit of physical defense to work with alongside its very high special defense. And if you combine this with, say, Aurora Veil on like an Abomasnow, the amount of bulk you can get on this Pokemon is probably the highest in the game, which, even though benefiting from Snow would require it to still be an Ice type, I think there is still a good case for keeping it an Ice type to make its defensive stats more well-rounded. So this Pokemon can be set up to literally be invincible and just be impossible for your opponent to get through, especially if you can isolate and take out the things that your particular Regice build would be weak to. Because it's not uncommon for people to have a Flutter Mane in the back as a finisher to clean up the game. And if you take out any threats to Regice prior to that Flutter Mane coming out, even if you're down to your last Pokemon, so you're down to just the Regice, and it's Regice versus Flutter Mane, based on the numbers, it is impossible for Flutter Mane to win that. They would have to get like multiple crits in a row, and you would have to like miss a Flash Cannon for Regice to actually lose that, or just low roll your Ice Beams or whatever. You can set up Regice to be in a very favorable position, and the Terrestrialize gimmick, I think, makes it considerably easier to do that. Because if you made Regice an electric type, it's only weak to ground. So Earthquakes and Earth Powers are the only thing that threatens it. It's also an Ice type as its base typing, so you have Stab, Ice Beam to take out ground types. And if you run it in a Snow team with Abomasnow, that is a big threat to ground types. And we saw neutrally effective damage with choice specs, and Terrestrialized boost still does not do enough damage to outpace Regice on the special side. So I think this Pokemon has the potential to be at its absolute best, better than it's ever been in Gen 9 specifically. And that is because you can get rid of that awful defensive typing of Ice and actually make this thing a brick wall. Just running it with like Screens or Intimidate, just anything else to give it a little bit of extra bulk, it's going to be really hard to get through. And because of Clear Body, you can't stall it out that well, because you can't lower its special attack in any way. So it could just sit there spamming charge beams at you until it gets a special attack buff. And then those Ice Beams are really going to start hitting hard, and there's no way to stop it. You'd have to put so much offense into it that it can just stall out, and if you guess wrong on what its Terra type is, and it flips to water and you hit it with fire, you do no damage. And I even remember back in Gen 8, using a Dynamax Regice that was like max special defense assault vest as an answer to Charizard, because it could take the G-Max Wildfire quite well and proceed to one-hit the Charizard with Max Rockfall from Ancient Power, which is absolutely hilarious that Regice has that much bulk that it could take one of the strongest hits in the game. Like, I ran the numbers on it. In Sun, with Life Orb boost, that Charizard did not take out Regice. With the Regice I was running, I want to say it did roughly 20 to 30% when it was Dynamaxed, just because I had Friend Guard run alongside it. So it would literally just tank the hit, even if it was super effective and one of the strongest hits in the game, and just one-hit that Charizard, and you just win the game basically off of that. Regice has the potential to do some really funny stuff with its special defense, and this game gives it more options to be even more funny. So I'm not going to call this Pokemon bad, because I don't actually think it will be. But it may struggle in popularity just because it's not particularly impressive on the offensive side, and its physical defense is still not super great. It's a lot of commitment to terrestrialize Regice, and if it doesn't have the right coverage, you could just kind of get walled out by something or put to sleep by a Mungus or whatever. So I don't expect it to really be that common, but man, if your team is all special attackers and you don't have a great answer for a special wall, Regice will chip away at your team and you won't be able to touch it. That thing could be run next to NDD with Hill Pulse. What do? You just gotta hope to cheese it in some form or fashion, because it's not gonna be easy to get through. So I'm actually kind of excited at the possibility. I don't think Regice is confirmed for any DLC as far as I know, but I would love to see Regice in this game, because I feel like it would be so much fun to build a team for it and just watch it completely wall, like, achieve Fluttermane lead or something like that. It would be so fun to just see that. But anyway, that's gonna be it for this video. If you have any suggestions for a Pokemon you want to see covered for speculation, or just competitive overview for a Pokemon that is confirmed to be coming to the game, let me know down in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. I will see y'all next time.